Okay, so I'm going to give you a crash course on how to graph in Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel is a really widely used program around the world. Very, very valuable in terms of business, data analysis, spreadsheets, any kind of organizational numbers, presentation-based type stuff. Okay, so I'm going to give you a crash course and see if we can work through some of these issues because we're going to have to learn how to do this at some point this year. Just a basic gist because they only give me 10 minutes of film time before they cut me off. You have your A through whatever going columns going to the right, and you have your numbers 1 through whatever going down. And I'll go through a different tutorial on just some basic formatting things. But right now I wanted to focus mainly on the graphing. Okay, and so what I have here are 3 different columns of information. I have a mass of, say, 5 pieces of wood, and I have, for type 1, we'll call this type 1, one type of wood, type 1 here, and I have type 2, we'll call this type 2 of wood. I have different volumes, so obviously some wood is more dense than others, and so they're going to have different larger volumes or smaller volumes depending on their size mass. So let's take a look at what it means to graph this. Real importantly, whenever you make data tables, it's really important that the numbers you want to put in a graph don't have units on them. As soon as I put a unit on this, Excel doesn't understand the meaning of that unit. Like if I put a G there or centimeters there, it gets all crazy. So put those units up in your headings and then leave them off your data below. That's really going to help you out. Okay, now a couple ways you can do this. If I were to go and like highlight all this and click on a chart or a scatter plot, Excel would kind of guess what I want to do. And if I don't put my things in the right order, it might have a hard time. It might guess things that I don't really want them to guess on. So usually I kind of build my graphs from scratch. And the way to do that is click on a blank cell. All right. If I have any one of these cells clicked on or selected, it kind of starts to build based off what it thinks. Versus if I go over here, it'll let me build from scratch. So in the insert tab up there on top, we're going to go over here to where it says charts. And the chart we're always going to want for physics is this chart right here in the middle that has basically a bunch of dots on it. That's called a scatter plot. And we're not connect the lines people. We're going to do that on our own. So we're just going to go with this first original base scatter plot. We're going to click on that, and it's going to pop up a nice little blank screen. I can take that and slide that around wherever I want. And you can see I have a certain number of options up here. And when I click, say, back to the numbers, my options change. The way to get back to that is just click back on the graph, and now those options come up again. Okay? Now, first step first, let's choose a layout. I tend to just default to this original layout. It gives me nice horizontal grid lines. It gives me a place to put my legend or key over on the side, a title. I can label my axes. It's pretty simple. A lot of these other things have some of that stuff, and maybe not all that I'm looking for. So I tend to like this layout right here. Okay, so we'll click on that. Nothing's going to change yet because we haven't put any data in. So let's go up here to select data. This is how we're going to put all our data in this machine. Right now, nothing's showing up because we have nothing selected. The first thing we want to do is we want to add a series of data. When I say series, I mean a group of X's and a group of Y's. Okay, so if we want to, we can name this series. I'm going to show you how to put multiple series on one graph. Sometimes we'll do that. Sometimes we won't. And they don't have to be together in a data table. We can kind of pick and choose from anywhere we want how we want to put this data in. But let's name this series wood type 1 or just type 1. Okay? And we want our X value. So on the X axis, in this case, we're going to put our volumes. So I'm going to go over here and click on this little arrow that says select range. Not on the box here, but on the arrow. I'm going to click on that, and it's basically waiting for me to tell it what numbers to put in. And I'm going to go and I'm going to click and drag over those 5 volumes. And it brings up some weird language there, equals sheet 1, $, craziness. But that's just basically it telling me what I told it to do. Click back on the arrow, and it should pop those values in there for me. Okay? Now let's go over to the Y values. Click on this little arrow, and then I'm going to click and drag down over these 5 masses and put those back up here. And as we see, look what happens. Those dots appear right on my graph right away in great shape. Okay, and over here in the legend, it's showing me that these blue dots represent type 1. I can hit OK. Now, in a lot of cases, we might be done there. We can go through and we can edit and change our axes, change our title, do stuff like that. But we're gonna add, for our purposes, one more series. So we already have series type 1 in there. I want to add another series. I want to add, well, type 2 in there. Likewise, I'm going to go in. My X values are going to be my volumes. My Y values are going to be my masses. And look at that. Now it seems like we have, well, some other data in there for us, right? Two different sets. And now we see those there, type 1, type 2. I could even go in and edit those if I wanted to. Maybe I goofed and did something wrong. I switched my X and my Y axis. Not stuff you want to do, but that happens. You can go in and edit that. But we're going to hit OK, and voila, we have this magic graph ready for us to go. Okay, now here's what's nice about doing it this way. What if I realize that maybe this value wasn't correct? What if I goofed, right? So I could come in here and say, okay, well, being the fact that maybe you didn't do that quite right, maybe this number was supposed to be 33, I could change that, and it naturally or automatically is going to change that value on the graph for me, which is a really great thing, okay? And it can do that for individual points. There are lots of ways you can change your graph without changing a whole bunch of different things. So we can come in here, we can go ahead and do some like typing of, hey, we'll say this is a wood density graph for two different woods. And I could label that in mass in grams and label this over here in volume in centimeters cubed. I have this awesome legend over here that reminds me, hey, the blue is this type of wood and the yellow or orange is this type of wood. Now, next thing I want to show you is how to do what's called a scatter plot, or not a scatter plot, but fit this to a trend line. If I go to any of these dots, let's say we'll take the orange, because Excel will treat the orange different than the blue. So I'm going to right-click on one of these orange dots. I'm going to go down to where it says Add a Trend Line. Okay, now some options pop up. In this case, when I look at my graph, I'm looking at probably what seems to be a linear relationship. Ooh, where do our chart options go? I might have to redo that. Okay, let's slide this over here. Again, oh, it gave me a trend line in itself. Let's go back and format that trend line. So it gave me a trend line. I want the linear type in this case because it looks like my dots kind of form a linear shape. There's some other things I can do. Maybe for some situations I want this thing or expect this thing to go through 0, 0. So I could set my intercept to 0. That wouldn't make much sense here. See how that kind of messes up my trend line? So we're going to leave that one off. But in most cases, I want to display my equation on the chart. What's that going to do? That's going to pop up a mathematical equation that basically tells me exactly what the y equals mx plus b equation is for that line. And I can hit OK, and voila, now I have this awesome looking trend line. I can do the same thing for this other one. I can add a trend line. I want it to be linear. I want to display the equation on the chart. And now we have two great looking trend lines with equations. This one can go with that guy, and that one can go with that guy. Now, for my taste, I don't see a point in having these trend lines on my legend. So I'm just going to click on those and make those disappear. If you always goof on something, you can always kind of go backwards and undo. No big deal. The last thing we'd probably do to make this graph complete is we go in here, and sometimes I don't care about all this information on the equation. Maybe I just want part of it. For example, maybe in this case, I realize that the slope of this line is the mass over volume ratio. So I want to come in here and change that to, say, density, and change this to grams per centimeters cubed. And now that reads something that's a little bit more valuable to me. And maybe I don't even care about the y-intercept at all. Okay, and I could put that on there, and I could make this graph presentable, copy and paste it to something else. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. There'll be more to come on formatting and things like that.